For every age of progress, there was an equal age of pain. Behind the inventions that lifted humanity stood devices meant to crush it. They were crafted not to kill, but to make death feel like mercy. Kings, priests, and judges called them justice. History calls them torture. From iron, fire, and fear, humans built tools to control, to punish, to silence. In dungeons and courts, in villages and empires, these machines became the language of power. Their purpose was simple: to make suffering eternal. Some were used for faith, others for obedience, and many for pure spectacle. Each was a reflection of the darkness that lies beneath civilization. The heretic, the thief, the rebel, the woman who spoke too much all faced the same fate. And the machines that broke them still whisper in museums and ruins today. What you are about to see is not fantasy. These are the real instruments designed to break the human body and spirit. Each tells a story of cruelty, control, and the strange hunger for pain that shaped our past. Tonight we descend into humanity's cruelest inventions. 4 archetypes of suffering, control, pain, shame, and endurance. Each one a masterpiece of horror. This is every torture device explained. In the age of fear and faith, control was the first weapon. Not through swords or armies, but through devices that silenced and restrained. They were made of iron, yet spoke louder than any king's decree. The first was the heretic's fork, a cruel symbol of forced devotion. 2 metal prongs pressed between the chin and chest, locking the head in eternal prayer. Sleep was forbidden movement, unbearable faith enforced through agony. Victims were left awake for days, collapsing only when the fork pierced flesh and silence fell. Then came the scold's bridle, a cage for the mouth and mind. Iron wrapped around the head with spikes under the tongue to punish speech itself. It wasn't about pain alone, but humiliation, parading women in the streets as lessons to others. The choke pear followed, disguised as a simple fruit of metal. It was inserted and expanded mouth, throat, or worse, stretching tissue until it tore. The device didn't kill immediately, it only taught that defiance had no escape. The king board, heavy and wooden, forced shame into motionless display. Locked around the neck, it turned punishment into a public stage. Every passerby was a judge, every stare a sentence. And finally, the head crusher, the purest machine of submission. A handle turned slowly, tightening iron bands around the skull until bones cracked. It was not used to kill, but to erase, to make the condemned disappear behind their own screams. These were not instruments of justice, but symbols of power, where silence itself became obedience. There are punishments that sought not just to kill, but to unmake the human body. Pain became both the weapon and the message. These were not tools of justice, they were rituals of fear. Among the most infamous was the blood eagle, a Norse execution said to turn death into spectacle. The victim's ribs were cut away from the spine and pulled outward like wings. The lungs were drawn through the openings, breath itself turned into agony. Whether myth or truth, the blood eagle remains a symbol of ritualized horror. Then came the breast ripper, iron claws forged to tear rather than kill. It was used on women accused of sin or betrayal, as if purity could be restored through pain. The device was heated until red, then pressed against flesh to leave scars forever. In its twisted logic, the mark was proof of confession. The iron chair offered no escape, only the slow endurance of fire and metal. Its spikes covered every inch, and when heated, they burned into the skin of those forced to sit. Each minute was an eternity of screams echoing off the stone walls of judgment. The Spanish tickler mocked its name, a claw that tickled until skin and muscle were gone. Its simplicity made it universal, small enough to hide, cruel enough to terrify. And when all else failed, there was the rack, the master of dismemberment. Limbs pulled in opposite directions, joints snapping one by one under the strain. It was pain turned into geometry. The body stretched until faith itself tore apart. Together, these machines revealed a truth older than mercy, that mankind's imagination for pain knows no limits. Not every torture left visible scars. Some worked quietly deep inside the mind. The pain was silence, isolation, or the slow collapse of identity. These were punishments designed not to wound the flesh, but to erase the soul. The White Room was among the most insidious. A cell without edges, color, or sound, only the endless hum of nothing. The victim's world became pure white, their senses starving for meaning. Days turned to weeks and time lost all direction. Many emerged blind, broken, or no longer certain they existed at all. Beneath castles and prisons, there were places called Ubet dungeons. Deep pits carved into the earth where prisoners were simply dropped and forgotten. They would hear footsteps fading away above the sound of the world, leaving them behind. Down there, no light, no sound, no names, just the slow rot of memory. In time, some began to talk to the walls, believing the echoes were answers. Others fell silent, consumed by the dark. And when death finally came, it was not from pain, but from being erased. The jolting cages added humiliation to despair. Victims were locked inside metal cages hung in public squares. The crowd would pass by pointing laughing or praying, no one sure which was worse. Their bodies became lessons their shame made eternal. These tortures didn't kill with fire or blade, they killed by dismantling what made a person human. The mind became the battlefield and the soul the casualty. There are punishments that go beyond pain, they seek to erase the soul itself. In ancient and medieval times, execution was not just justice, it was performance. Public death became a message carved in flesh, a theatre of control. The condemned were not simply killed, they were transformed into warnings. One of the most infamous was lynching, known as death by 1,000 cuts, a ritual of cruelty where the executioner cut small pieces of flesh from the victim's body. Each slice was meant to prolong agony, turning time itself into torture. The condemned would remain conscious, enduring hundreds of cuts before death. In the crowd, silence was often louder than screams. Then came the Brazen Bull, a hollow statue of bronze shaped like a beast. The victim was locked inside while fires roared beneath. As the metal heated, the person inside was roasted alive. Tubes were designed to turn screams into the sound of a bull's bellow. It was theatre disguised as punishment, the birth of engineered horror. The pendulum brought a different terror, not sudden but precise. A sharp blade hung above, swinging lower with each pass. The condemned would watch death approach inch by inch, swing by swing. It was torture by anticipation, where fear itself was the executioner. The Iron Maiden turned death into confinement. A coffin of spikes that closed around the victim like a dark embrace. Whether real or exaggerated by legend, its idea alone was enough to terrify. And then the Spanish donkey, a simple plank shaped like a triangle. The victim was forced to straddle it while weights pulled their legs downward. A slow, splitting pain that turned bone to memory. These devices remind us that cruelty often wears the mask of order. That extinction can come not from beasts or war, but from humanity itself. Every device built for pain reveals a civilization's true reflection. And in that mirror, history often stares back unblinking. These were not just tools of pain, they were reflections of fear, power, and control. From the iron of faith to the fire of punishment, humanity shaped cruelty into craft. Every device carried the same idea that pain could create obedience. But pain never built order, it only built silence. The Heretic's fork, the Brazen Bull. The White Room, all were meant to break what makes us human. And yet every time the body broke, the idea of justice fractured with it. History remembers these inventions not for their purpose, but for their consequence. They remind us how easily civilization can disguise horror as law. The further we move from these machines, the closer we come to understanding ourselves. Because every generation creates its own version of the rack, it just looks different now. And when we study them, we are not looking into the past, we are looking into a mirror. If this journey into the dark history of torture fascinated you, there are more stories waiting below the surface. Subscribe to the channel and help us keep exploring the shadows where history meets the human condition. This is Every Torture Device Explained. Until next time, stay curious, stay humane.